Good evening from New York. This is Tuesday, December 7th, 700 days until the 2012 presidential election. The president today, irritated, almost defiant, shouted back at his critics, nearly all of them on his side. In a mid-afternoon news conference, he acknowledged that going into the bargaining on the issue of tax cuts for the rich, the public had been on his side, quoting, "We weren't operating from a position of political weakness with respect to public opinion." But the president said he did not have the votes in the Senate to get what he really wanted. And Republicans, he said, would not budge on that which he was a month ago, calling tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires.
I've said before that I felt that the middle-class tax cuts were being held hostage to the high-end tax cuts. I think it's tempting not to negotiate with hostage takers unless the hostage gets harmed. In this case, the hostage was the American people, and I was not willing to see them get harmed.
The president said a fight might have been good politics but bad for the economy. But according to the Washington Post, a White House political strategy to win back independent voters facilitated this deal. More on that in a moment. As for whether the deal represents a template for the president's fighting spirit or a lack thereof,
I will be happy to see the Republicans test whether or not I'm itching for a fight on a whole range of issues. I suspect they will find I am.
And does the president think he caved?
So this notion that somehow we are willing to compromise too much reminds me of the debate that we had during health care. This is the public option debate all over again. People will have the satisfaction of having a purist position and no victories for the American people. That can't be the measure of what it means to be a Democrat. This country was founded on compromise.
The deal has as its centerpiece the extension of all the Bush tax cuts for 2 years, as well as a 13-month extension of unemployment insurance, a 2% cut in payroll taxes for 1 year, and the extension of other tax cuts from the Obama stimulus package, like the child tax credit, the earned income tax credit, the college tuition tax credit. There are also further business tax breaks, and this, a weakening of the state tax to levels championed by Republicans. All of it totaling nearly $900 billion over the lifetime of the various tax breaks. But from the viewpoint of many Democrats and some Republicans, this deal may be built on quicksand. House Speaker Pelosi today said that within the Democratic caucus, quote, "So far the response has not been very good. We have some unease." Congressman Peter Welch says he already has more than 20 signatories to a letter opposing the deal on the grounds that it is fiscally irresponsible. The Congressional Progressive Caucus has called on the House and the Senate to hold firm on a middle-class tax cut with no strings attached. And from some Senate Democrats, harsher words still. Senator Mary Landrieu of Louisiana on extending tax cuts for millionaires, quote, "I'm going to argue forcefully for the nonsensicalness and the almost, moral corruptness of that particular policy." From Senator Bernie Sanders, who caucuses with the Democrats, the deal is, quote, "a moral outrage."
I will do whatever I can to see that 60 votes are not acquired to pass this piece of legislation.
Asked what he thought of the agreement, Senator Pat Leahy said not much. Senate Majority Whip Dick Durbin said some Democrats may threaten to oppose the deal as leverage. As details are hammered out, quoting, "There is a group that may walk." Senate Majority Leader Reid today expressed strong concerns, stressed the deal was a framework, and already complaining about the extension of unemployment benefits in the deal. Republicans like Senator Jim DeMint, Senator Tom Coburn, and Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann. Joining me now, Washington Post staff writer, columnist for Newsweek, and MSNBC contributor Ezra Klein. Ezra, good evening.
Good evening, Keith.
To put this in a little perspective, it's nearly $900 billion in terms of price. Mm-hmm. How much of that is for unemployment insurance, jobless benefits, the very thing that pumps money into the economy where it's most needed, most effective, and obviously most immediately impacting and absorbed?
Sure. So $56 billion are for jobless benefits, a 13-month extension. About $300 billion are for the middle-class tax cuts, tax cuts under $250K. About $130 billion are for the tax cuts for the rich and the estate tax. Then there's $120 billion for a payroll tax cut. That's a pretty progressive measure. $40 billion for the tax extenders. That's earned income tax credit. That's education tax credits. Those are pretty good, too. And then, depending on how you count it, there's either $30 billion or $180 billion for a tax break to help businesses invest in 2011 and 2012 to have them pull that investment up. So there's a lot going on in the bill and a lot of price tags in it.
The 13-month extension on on jobless benefits. Who gets left out? Who has the potential of getting left out of these benefits?
So it is a continuation of the current law. So the folks who are beyond 99 weeks, the folks who have been unemployed, they're in places like Nevada, places with very, very high unemployment rates, and so it's just very difficult to find a job if you've lost one. We have not extended it past the 5th tier. We've not extended it to 111 weeks or 130 weeks, as some have argued we should, and as I believe we should. But it is the people who are currently receiving unemployment benefits, about 2 million of whom would have been cut off by Christmas if we don't extend it. Those people are set. They're secure.
The payroll tax holiday. There are various interpretations of this. One of them is you are providing sort of a template for later that allows people to screw around with how Social Security is funded. Do you see validity in that?
A little. I actually think liberals go too far, and by the way, conservatives too. This whole theory of the trust fund that we have, it's essentially an accounting fiction. We have a budget. We have money that comes into the budget or the government from different sources, and we use that money in different ways. It is true that the payroll tax is usually used to fund Social Security, but what they're saying is they'll move funds later on from the general fund, which is normal taxes, income taxes, other types of revenue, over to fill what gets taken out of the payroll tax. Frankly, at the end of the day, what matters for Social Security solvency is the government solvency. What matters for the government solvency is that the amount of money coming in matches the amount of money going out, and it doesn't matter if that's in the payroll tax or not in the payroll tax. So that doesn't worry me very much, no.
Dealing with the fiscal time bomb of the Bush plus tax cuts, again, 2 years from now, is that supposed to be easier somehow? Don't they even look more like settled law with 2 more years of crust on them?
It's very difficult to say. I suspect you may be right, and what's important here, the Republicans think you're right and the White House thinks you're wrong. What the White House will tell you is in 2 years it is a much stronger economy, so you can't say you can't be raising anybody's taxes, even the rich, during a recession, because we need to create jobs. And there is a higher deficit and potentially will be turning more towards deficit reduction. Right now we should not be worrying about deficit reduction. We should be pumping money into the economy. And the White House will say, look, that position isn't popular now. Well, we didn't fight on it, but it isn't popular now. It won't be popular then, and we would happily take Republicans on that ground. Republicans will say Americans hate tax increases of any kind. We'll win that one. I don't really anticipate that they're right, but the question is whether or not the White House is more interested in standing firm on that this next time than they were this time.
Is this trickle-down economics, and in light of the fact that David Stockman was here last Friday saying it's crap and any tax cut should be vetoed, no matter who they're for, why would trickle-down economics play any part in this economy today?
Some is, some isn't. I think it's important to be clear. Of the $900 billion we mentioned, only $130 billion of that are tax cuts for the rich. The bulk of it is the tax cuts that Obama wanted to extend, the tax cuts for people under 250. Then the $120 billion in payroll tax cut. That's a good progressive tax cut. That's bigger than tax cuts for the rich. So the bulk of it is not trickle-down economics. The bulk of it are things that most people agree count as essentially tax-side stimulus. Now, the tax cuts for the rich, that is not a good way to spend $130 billion. It's not very stimulative. Doesn't appear to me to be great for the economy. It's not good from an equity standpoint, but it is it's the cost of all the other stuff. It's the cost of the rest of the stimulus.
Ezra Klein of the Washington Post. Great thanks, Ezra.
Thank you.